is insert for entity for name, the thing we saw above there, insert new object for entity for name, okay? It doesn't auto-create them ever. Okay, so that's how I access my attributes. What if I, though, wanted to add code to my photo or my photographer classes? I could put that code in photo.m and h, but that would be a problem. And why is that? Well, that might be a problem because, well, first of all, why would I want to do that? Let's say I wanted to add a class method to photo that took a Flickr database or Flickr dictionary as an argument and created a photo in the database. That would be an awfully convenient utility method to have in photo, right? I could say open square bracket photo, make a photo with this Flickr data in a context, and it could do it, right? So that would be cool. Or if I want to derive a property, like I've got this nice property thumbnail URL, but unfortunately it's a string. What if I wanted to have a UI image, which was the thumbnail UI image? Then I could have a little method in photo that just self.thumbnail URL, turn it into URL, go look it up somewhere, preferably not on the internet, but maybe it would just be a method that would block. I don't know. So that would be cool to add to photo as well. So in other words, it would be nice if we could put all our photo-related stuff in photo.m and h, not just the setters and getters for all our properties. Why is this a problem, though? The problem is, as you change your visual map, you're constantly calling that regenerate method, menu item, the create NS managed object subject. So it's kind of always rewriting them. Okay, it's always blasting what's in there. So we can't do it. Okay, if we edit photo M and H, then we can no longer go into Xcode and say create managed object subclasses for me anymore. And that's a bummer because, especially in development, we're iterating. We add in some properties, we're adding some entities, changing some relationships. We want to constantly be going back and regenerating those things. Okay? Question? No?
Back to talking about like if you could have Xcode auto set the photographer for a photo. Is there a way to, say, set all the defaults for the photographer and then set the default for that relationship in the photo in Xcode to like photographer alloc init?
Yeah, so the question is, could I set the default for the who-took property to be photographer alloc init, basically? So that the default would always default to creating a photographer. And unfortunately, you can't do that. But that'd be cool. The defaults all have to be kind of, like I said, static, kind of constants. All right, so what are we going to do then? Because we want to add methods to photo.m and h, and we want to add methods to photographer.m and h, but we don't want to have to touch those files. Well, we're going to use a new Objective-C language feature, the last one I'm going to teach you, okay? I think you know them all after this, called categories. Okay? Categories let you add a method to a class without subclassing. Okay? And you don't even have to have the source for that class that you're adding the method to. Okay? So what are some examples of this? Well, in the UI kit, there's a method ns attributed string draw at point. Okay, well, ns attributed string is in Foundation. It's not a UI kit thing. It's just a generic attributes on a string thing. But UI kit adds all these, draw at point, and it defines all these other attributes can be on there. And it does all that in UI kit. And it doesn't even need the source for ns attributed string. Okay? It just needs to know that class exists. Same thing, ns index path. I told you ns index path only had two methods on it, row and section. But actually, ns index path has a whole bunch of methods on it. It's in Foundation. It's just a generic index pointer into an arbitrary, linked list of items. It's just that UI table view wants to call it row and section. So it adds the properties row and section to ns index path. Even though, again, table view is in UI kit. This index path is in Foundation, not even the same framework. Okay? So how does this work? And it looks like this. You have an interface and an implementation, just like a class, but you say, instead of saying @interface, name of class, superclass, you say @interface, the name of the class I want to add methods to, and then in parentheses, what I'm going to call this category. And you can call it anything you want. So here I've called it add-on, but you could call it Flickr, you could call it create, whatever you want to do. Then you just list all the methods you want to add to this class, and they can be properties. Here I have a read-only property and another method. You just put them on there, and then @end. Okay? So that's all you need to do. Now anyone who wants to call these methods just has to import this header file that has this in there. Now, there's a big restriction on categories, gigantic restriction. You can't use any instance variables. Okay? So the implementation of your methods cannot use instance variables or any stored state at all. Okay? There are ways kind of around it, but they're hacks. Okay? So generally, categories is for methods. They have no state. Well, what good is that? Well, the object that you're adding the methods to, it has a lot of state. And so these methods would all be implemented by using the state of the object you're adding the methods to. Okay? So like, let's look at an example for these two methods. So here's the implementation, the @sign implementation of photo. Photos add-on category. So I'm adding these two methods to the photo class, which is that thing we generated in Xcode. Image, you see, it just uses self.photoURL. Self is the photo because these methods are being added to photo class. Okay, so self is a photo. .photoURL gets that attribute, gets that data. That's probably, it actually probably would be self, it would be NSURL from string, self.photoURL string, because we can't put URLs directly in the database. But anyway, and then it would say return UI image, image with data, and return the image. Okay? So no instance variables there. It's not using instance variables. Same thing with isOld. Might say self.uploadDate, time interval since now is greater than a day ago. Okay? Question?
So by no instance variable, you just mean like you can't like access it through like the underbar, the underscore or that?
No, I mean you cannot declare any new ones. Okay, so you cannot use any instance variables here. You could only use instance variables in the class you're adding it to if they make them public via properties or whatever.
I couldn't quite hear you. Did you say that the instance variables you access have to be public, or they can be private? Or?
Okay, you can't have any instance variables in the category, period. Okay, you cannot declare any. If you want to use instance variables of the class you're adding the methods to, right, then they have to be public because all you can do is see the public header file. You don't see the implementation of photo. You're adding these methods to it blind. You don't know anything about its implementation. So anyway, so this is called categories. I don't teach this to you early on because this is easily abused. All right, you could add methods to UIKit classes. There's no reason you couldn't. You could add methods to, you know, foundation classes, completely unrestricted. The only thing is when you start doing that, your code can kind of get a little obfuscated. People are like, what? I didn't know that, you know, this UIKit class had that method, and it's because you've added it as a category over here. And so it's just kind of hard to understand. But sometimes like this, we want to do that because it kind of it collects our code and it makes things look nicer. Question?
Is it possible to overwrite with that?
Okay, so the question is, can I override or overwrite, really, a method that already exists? And the answer is, don't do that. Okay, that is really hard to understand for people reading your code what you mean by that. So only add methods. Don't try to replace or otherwise, you know, use the same method. That's a good question. All right. So here's a common category method we add for subclasses of NSManageObject, which is creation. So imagine I had this category called photo create. And I'm going to have this method that I'm going to add to photo called photo with Flickr data in managed object context. And it's going to query the database, see if that photo already exists. It's going to return it if it does. If not, it's going to insert new object for entity for name, initialize the photo from the dictionary you sent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to do all that work all in one method. So that if someone wants to create a new photo using Flickr data, they can just call this one method, class method in photo. Okay, so this is a classic reason why we would do this. Okay? So how do we create a category? So we go to Objective-C, new file, of course, and instead of saying Objective-C class, right, you see Objective-C class there, you say Objective-C category. And instead of asking you the class and the superclass, it's going to say what class do you want to add a method to, and what do you want to call this category. So I'm going to add methods to photo. I'm going to call the category Flickr. And then it creates photo plus flickr.h and photo plus flickr.m. Now, this is kind of the standard naming convention for a category. You call it name of the class you're adding the methods to plus the name of the category. Okay, the plus as a separator, and also because plus means you're adding these methods to it. So it's kind of a naming convention. You could call those header file and the implementation file anything you want, really, but this is what we 100% of the time call it. Okay, name of class plus category. And you can see that it's created a .h for me and a .m. And I just put the methods I want to add in the .h, and then I implement them in the .m. It's just that I can't, unfortunately, have any instance variables. Okay? Yeah, question?
So if I just
create like an empty text file and then drag it in, how will Xcode know whether it's a category or is it a order?
Yeah, so the question is, instead of using new file category, if I just created an empty file and started typing this stuff in, how does Objective-C know this is a category? Well, when you go new file category, that's just a convenience. It's just creating this for you as a convenience. You could certainly just type this stuff in. It knows it's a category because it's @interface photo parentheses Flickr, right? It knows that that parentheses thing, if you have in parentheses with some word in there, it knows that means a category. And then same thing on the implementation side. You say, OK, I'm providing the implementation of that category. So the answer is, yeah, you could do that. New file is just making it easy for you, so it does this. That's all. OK, any questions about this? And we'll see this in the demo on Wednesday, where we'll add a category to photo. OK, so now you know how to insert objects. You know how to change their properties. We know how to create the custom subclass, so we can do all this with dot notation. What about deleting objects from the database? Okay, this is all too easy. Okay, as Darth Vader would say, it's all too easy. You just call delete object on the context. Give the object, bam, it deletes it. Now, deleting the object can have ramifications, right? You delete a photographer, it's going to set that who took to nil. Okay, assuming you don't do that cascade delete rule, in which case it would delete the photographer. But okay, so deleting, you know, has ramification. You got to know what you're doing deleting. It's very easy to do. Two things to think about this. One, remember it doesn't actually delete the photo or delete the object until you save. So the autosave comes around and it'll be deleted. That's just a minor point. It's kind of obvious. Same thing with all of the changes you make. They don't happen on the database until that autosave happens or until you explicitly save. But the second thing with deletion that you got to be really careful is, see that argument photo, delete object colon photo? If that photo is a strongly held to pointer, you better set it to nil right after this. Okay? Because you cannot access that photo anymore. It is invalid. Right? After you hit delete photo, or delete object rather, that thing you deleted, get rid of all your strong pointers to it because it's no good. Right? It's been deleted. So if you try to say photo.title equals something on the next line, I don't even know what would happen. Something bad. Don't do it. Okay? I mean, that's completely obvious, right? But it's something people forget, and then they're like, "What? It's not working." Okay? One other thing about deletion that's kind of cool. Core data will send the method, send a message, prepare for deletion, to all objects when you send delete object. Okay? So if I say delete object photo, that photo will be sent, if it implements it, prepare for deletion. And the cool thing is you can put this prepare for deletion in a category. So you can add the prepared for deletion method to photo or photographer in a category. Now, what would you do in that prepare for deletion? Well, you don't need to do anything with the who took or the photos or anything like that. That's all taken care of for you. But what if you had another property somewhere in the database which was counting the photos or something like that, and deleting this photo would change that count? And why would you have such a thing? Because it's possible to just query the count of photos that a photographer has, for example. Maybe, you know, it's a count that for efficiency, you're checking something about the photo and keeping this count. And maybe if you delete the photo, you need to update that count. Well, you can do that, all that kind of stuff here in prepare for deletion. Okay? You can basically do anything in the database you want in prepare for deletion. And the thing that's being deleted is not yet deleted. Okay? So it's still in the database at the point this is called. But after you return from this method, then the object's going to be deleted. So you better have updated the database however you need. Okay? Got that? All right. So now you can create objects with insert. You can get and set the properties. You can delete the objects. One last thing to want to do in a database, query. Okay? Which means go out into the database and get me objects that match some criteria. Okay? So we do this in core data with an object called an NSFetch request. All right? It's exactly what you think it is. You're requesting to fetch some objects from the database.